Who was the ancient astronaut that the ancient Greek mathematician Pythagoras met? We often hear, read, or watch documentaries about ancient astronauts thousands of years ago, hypotheses of mysterious finds reminiscent of or are ancient flying chariots, UFOs as we call them, and we research them well. But it seems that we have missed a recorded testimony, but also an encounter in the so-called historical years of Pythagoras with an astronaut, an extraterrestrial, who came on board with an arrow. The ancient astronaut meets Pythagoras. The god Apollo is known for his incomparable accuracy in archery. His arrows never fail. He used his ability to avenge the Cyclops, whom he blamed for the death of Asclepius' son, and with great skill he aimed his bow and with one and only one arrow did away with the Cyclops. After that the arrow flew alone and hid in the temple of Apollo in the country of the far north. This flying arrow was given by the god to the far north priest Avarice, on whom he was transported for his journey for the far north to Delos. Avarice visited our planet in the time of Pythagoras, with whom he had contact, and in this fact the origin of Pythagoras but also of Pherecydes' teacher in the far north is traced. Kindly support my Patreon account since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. Besides, Pythagoras' relationship with the far north Apollo becomes apparent when Avarice met Pythagoras and thought him of the god himself, or of the god of which he was a priest, says Iamblichus, in whose text we can also read this. So they believe that this is the belief of their own perceptions, because the first to proclaim them was not a random person, but a god. And one of the hearings is this: "Who are you, Pythagoras?" Because they claim that Apollo was the far north. Proof of this is that in the flight, after he got up, he showed his thigh gold, and Avarice hosted the far north and took from him a javelin, an arrow, with which he traveled in the ether. And elsewhere we read, Avarice gave Pythagoras an arrow, with which he was holding when he came out of the sanctuary. This would be useful to him for all the difficulties that would occur during such great wanderings. So riding on it, he could cross the impassable. Also, Etherivatis is the surname of Avarice, because he was given a spear, an arrow, by Apollo of the far north and was carried on it. He crossed the impasses, walking in a way in the air, which some assumed he had done as Pythagoras. Avarice is rumored to have been one of Apollo's extreme northern priests who urged him to visit Greece. According to the Neoplatonists, and especially in the work on the Pythagorean life, Iamblichus calls him Scythians, who came from the far north, being inexperienced in Greek education, ignorant and advanced in age. So he approached Pythagoras to learn Greek philosophy. Pythagoras then, in order to introduce him to the various Pythagorean theorems, did not apply the pedagogical method, but the 5-year silence and the other trials, but in a short time he taught him the books on nature and on gods. Avarice, he continues in the text, emphasizing and repeating his far northern origin, was old and very wise. He had come to Greece and at the time was returning to his homeland, but he wandered and the road brought him to Italy, and there he saw Pythagoras and found that there is no other man like him. He gave Pythagoras an arrow, which Avarice had and kept from the time he left his country. Avarice had used this arrow because riding it, he could overcome all the difficulties he would encounter during his great wandering. So on it, he could cross the impassable, that is, rivers, lakes, swamps, mountains. In other words, he was flying on it. Pythagoras says Iambicus in Pythagoras B91 accepted the arrow as something natural, as if he were waiting for it, without being surprised or asking him why he gave it to him, but he took Avarice aside and showed him his thigh, which was gold, giving him a sign that he was not wrong. Then Pythagoras enumerated in Avarice one by one everything that is inside the sanctuary of Apollo of the underwater sea, and he assured him that everything was exactly like that. He also asked him to stay in Italy and teach those he met. So he stayed close to Pythagoras, who briefly taught him physiology, and instead of ionoscopy with sacrifices, gave him the prediction by numbers because he believed that this was the purest. He handed over other exercises of the spirit, the most proper ones, to Avarice. Apart from Pythagorean philosophy, Avarice was also introduced to Orphic philosophy. Orpheus, the son of Calliope, whose mother had initiated him on Mount Paganion, also taught Pythagoras and taught him that number is the definite essence of the gods, and that through numbers a miraculous prediction of the future happens. Pythagoras in turn taught all this to Avarice and taught him that instead of guessing with blood and slaughter, the safest knowledge is through numbers. He taught him the perfect knowledge of the whole truth, which had been deduced through arithmetic. Pythagoras B 146. Avarice, according to legend, was never seen drinking or eating anything. Once upon a time, Phalaris, the toughest of the tyrants of the cities of Greater Greece, captured Avarice and Pythagoras as prisoners because he saw them talking, and because Avarice, instead of admiring the tyrant, admired Pythagoras and asked him many questions, above all, of the sacred nature, such as what is the providence of the gods for humans, what is the relation of the statues, and if they should be worshipped, what are the celestial bodies and those that revolve around the earth, and much more. Pythagoras continued to teach Avarice that all things depend on and are governed by the power of God, and that the power of the soul rules the freedom of the will. He went on to discuss in detail the perfect energy of reason and mind, the parsimony of speech, tyranny, luck, injustice, human greed, and concluded that all worldly things are of no value. Then he gave him divine advice for the best life and compared it with corrupt life. He revealed to him that diseases and other heavy calamities of the body are the fruits of impurity. He revealed to him the distinction between those that come from destiny and the addicted and those that are made from the mind. In this way, Avarice was introduced to Pythagorean philosophy and learned its main doctrines, and he must have been one of the most important Pythagoreans. Legends and sources do not say whether he returned to the country from which he came down to relay the philosophy he was taught. Most likely he would have returned and transmitted to them the Pythagorean philosophy, and especially the doctrine of the immortality of the soul, of which the Scythians were known in antiquity. This is by Voula Lambrapoulou, professor at the University of Athens. Excerpts here are from Mythagogia, from mythology. And I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support.